If you've ever been dismissed by your own family while they bragged about charity work they couldn't actually afford, hit that like button and subscribe right now. You're not going to want to miss what happened next. My sister Morgan had been planning the Anderson Family Foundation's annual gala for 3 months. She transformed it into her personal social climbing expedition, complete with a guest list that read like a Fortune 500 directory and a minimum donation requirement that would make most people choke on their champagne. I was sitting in the back of the foundation's cramped conference room, quietly reviewing catering invoices on my tablet, when Morgan swept in wearing a designer dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Mom followed close behind, equally overdressed for a planning meeting. "We need to discuss the final guest list," Morgan announced, dropping a leather portfolio on the table with unnecessary drama. "This year's gala is going to put the Anderson name on the map with Seattle's elite philanthropic circles." The volunteer coordinator, a kind woman named Patricia, looked up from her notes. "We have 240 confirmed attendees. That's our biggest turnout in the foundation's history." "Exactly why we need to maintain standards," Mom interjected, shooting a pointed look in my direction. "This isn't some community potluck. This is a serious charitable event." I didn't respond. I'd learned years ago that silence was my best defense against their casual cruelty. Instead, I made a note about the wine order. The sommelier had suggested a pairing that would work better with the revised menu. Morgan pulled out her phone, scrolling with practiced efficiency. "I've been working with the event planner, and we've decided on a $50,000 minimum donation for admission. It's the only way to ensure we're attracting the right caliber of donor." Patricia's eyebrows shot up. 50,000? Morgan, most of our regular supporters can't afford that. We've never had a minimum that high. Which is exactly why the foundation has been stuck at the same funding level for 5 years, Morgan said smoothly. "We need to think bigger. The Bellevue Ballroom and Towers is Seattle's most prestigious venue. We can't fill it with people writing $500 checks." The venue name made me pause. I glanced up briefly, then returned to my tablet. The timing was interesting. "What about family?" Patricia asked carefully. "We always reserve tickets for board members' families." "Of course," Mom said quickly. "Morgan, your husband, me, your father. The people who actually contribute to the family's reputation." She paused deliberately. "We'll need to be selective about anyone else." Morgan's smile had sharp edges. "Actually, Mom, I was going to address that. Skylar." She looked directly at me for the first time since entering the room. "I don't think you should attend this year." I'd been expecting something like this, but hearing it stated so bluntly still landed like a slap. I kept my expression neutral, my fingers steady on the screen. "The optics matter," Morgan continued as if she were explaining basic math to a child. "This gala is about showcasing success. Having you there in your situation, it sends the wrong message to potential major donors." Her situation? Patricia's voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "Patricia, you're wonderful for volunteering your time," Mom said in that syrupy tone she used when dismissing people. "But you don't understand the dynamics of serious philanthropy. Image is everything. Skylar works as a caterer's assistant and lives in that tiny apartment in Capitol Hill. She's wonderful in her own way, but she's not exactly the face of the Anderson family legacy. I was actually a freelance event coordinator, not a caterer's assistant, but I'd stopped correcting them years ago. What they didn't know was that event coordinator was the simplest way to describe my actual work. I just never bothered to elaborate on the scale." "I understand," I said quietly, setting down my tablet. "I'll remove myself from the guest list." Morgan looked almost disappointed that I hadn't argued. She'd probably prepared an entire speech. "Good. I knew you'd see reason. You can still help with setup if you want. Behind the scenes, you know." "I appreciate the offer," I replied, keeping my tone even. "I'll let you know." The meeting continued with discussions about floral arrangements and photographer contracts. I stayed quiet, occasionally making notes, while Morgan and Mom debated between 2 nearly identical centerpiece options that cost $300 per table. What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask about, was that 5 years ago, I'd used the small inheritance from Grandma Ruth to start a property investment company. Grandma Ruth had been the only family member who'd seen past Morgan's perfect facade and Dad's dismissive attitude. She'd left me $200,000 with a note that said, Build something they can't take from you. I'd taken that money and with guidance from my mentor Elena Rodriguez, a commercial real estate developer I'd met through my actual event coordination work, turned it into a portfolio of 7 commercial properties across Seattle. My specialty was historic buildings. I bought neglected landmarks, restored them, and leased them to businesses that appreciated architectural significance. The Bellevue Ballroom and Towers was the crown jewel of that portfolio. I'd purchased it 18 months ago for $8.5 million when the previous owner's estate needed a quick sale. The building was a 1920s masterpiece that had been criminally undermaintained. I'd invested another $3.5 million in restoration, preserving the original Tiffany windows, refinishing the maple floors, updating the electrical and HVAC while maintaining the historical integrity. The property was now valued at $12.2 million. And every single person who booked it for an event signed a contract with Schuyler Anderson Properties LLC. I'd never mentioned my business to my family. Not because I was ashamed but because I'd wanted to see who they really were. Grandma Ruth's funeral had shown me their true colors. Morgan had spent the entire reception networking, Mom had complained about the catering, and Dad had actually asked if I'd be giving him a portion of his mother's money, since I probably didn't know what to do with it. That night, I decided to build my success in silence. Let them think I was barely scraping by. Let them dismiss me. Every condescending comment was just more evidence of who they'd chosen to be. Schuyler. Patricia's voice pulled me back to the present. Are you okay? I'm fine, I assured her. Just tired. Long week. After the meeting, I stayed behind to help Patricia pack up. Once Morgan and Mom had left, Patricia turned to me with worried eyes. You don't have to take that from them, she said softly. The way they spoke to you. I know, I interrupted gently. But I pick my battles. This isn't one of them. What I didn't tell Patricia was that I'd already picked this battle. I'd picked it the moment Morgan had called me 3 months ago, gushing about booking the most incredible venue in Seattle, for a price that was almost too good to be true. I'd given the Anderson Family Foundation a 40% discount on the rental fee. Not because I supported their elitist approach to charity, but because I wanted to see exactly how far Morgan would go. How cruel she'd become when she thought I had no power to push back. Now I knew. And the knowledge sat in my chest like cold steel. That evening I met with Elena at her downtown office. She'd been my mentor and friend for 5 years, and she'd watched my relationship with my family deteriorate with barely concealed frustration. They uninvited you from your own venue? Elena said flatly after I'd explained the situation. That's bold even for them. They don't know it's my venue, I reminded her. All the paperwork goes through the LLC. The booking was handled by my property manager, David. Elena leaned back in her chair studying me. So what's your play? You could just tell them now. I could, I agreed. But I want to wait. I want to see if Morgan actually goes through with it. If she's really willing to exclude me from a family foundation event to impress strangers who don't care about her. And if she does? I smiled, though there wasn't much humor in it. Then I'll have my answer about whether there's anything worth saving in this family. And I'll act accordingly. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. The next 2 weeks were instructive. Morgan called me once, not to apologize but to ask if I could help coordinate the catering setup on the day of the event. She phrased it like she was doing me a favor, offering me a chance to be involved, even if I couldn't attend as a guest. I declined politely. I had other plans for that evening. Mom sent a text 3 days before the gala. Morgan worked really hard on this. The least you could do is not make it about you. Some of us actually contribute to society. I didn't respond. Instead, I reviewed the event contract one more time with David, my property manager. Everything was in order. Payment had been received, the discounted amount processed through the foundation's account. The insurance was current. The catering company had confirmed their arrival time. The Bellevue Ballroom and Towers had never looked more beautiful. The restoration had revealed details that had been hidden under decades of poor maintenance. Intricate ceiling medallions, original brass fixtures, hand-carved crown molding. The grand ballroom could hold 300 guests comfortably, with soaring windows that overlooked Elliott Bay. It was going to be the perfect stage. On the morning of the gala, I received a call from David. We might have a situation, he said carefully. Your sister just arrived for setup and she's Making demands. What kind of demands? She wants to change the lighting configuration we discussed. She's insisting on using her own decorator instead of our recommended vendor. And, he paused. She asked if the owner would be attending tonight. Said she wanted to ensure we understood this was a high-profile event and everything needed to be perfect. I almost laughed. What did you tell her? That I'd pass along her concerns to ownership. She seemed satisfied with that. But Skylar, she's treating my staff like servants. It's getting uncomfortable. That was the line. I could tolerate a lot directed at me, but I wouldn't let Morgan bully my employees in my building. I'll be there in an hour, I told David. For the evening event as planned. If she has any issues with staff before then, have them refer her to the owner. Don't specify who that is. You're really going to do this? I'm really going to do this. I spent the afternoon in my downtown condo preparing. I'd bought a dress months ago for this exact scenario. A deep emerald silk gown that Grandma Ruth would have loved. Simple, elegant, expensive in a way that didn't scream but whispered. Elena called while I was doing my makeup. Last chance to back out, she said. You could just tell them privately. Avoid the drama. They chose the drama, I replied, applying lipstick with a steady hand. They uninvited me from a charity event at my own venue because they were embarrassed by my existence. They don't get a private conversation anymore. They get consequences. I'm proud of you, Elena said quietly. And Ruth would be too. That's all that matters. I arrived at the Bellevue at 7:30, 30 minutes after the gala's official start time. David met me at the private entrance, his expression professionally neutral but his eyes dancing with anticipation. They're all here, he said, walking me through the service corridor toward the main ballroom. Your family's been holding court near the silent auction tables. Your sister's been introducing people to Seattle's most exclusive venue, like she discovered it. How's the event going otherwise? Smoothly. Though I notice the actual donation totals are lower than expected. A lot of guests are commenting on the $50,000 minimum. Apparently several regular foundation supporters declined to attend because of it. That didn't surprise me. Morgan had been so focused on impressing wealthy strangers that she'd alienated the foundation's actual base. We paused at the service entrance to the ballroom. Through the door I could hear music, conversation, the gentle clink of champagne glasses. Ready? David asked. Ready. He opened the door and I stepped into my ballroom. The space looked magnificent. Candlelight reflected off the restored brass fixtures. The Tiffany windows glowed with colored light. 300 guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers that I'd had rewired and cleaned, revealing their original sparkle. I spotted Morgan immediately. She was near the center of the room, surrounded by a small group of well-dressed attendees, gesturing dramatically with a champagne flute. Mom stood beside her, nodding along to whatever story Morgan was telling. I walked slowly through the crowd, letting my presence register gradually. A few people I knew from the Seattle commercial real estate community recognized me, their eyebrows raising in surprise. Jennifer Kim, who owned 3 boutique hotels, actually mouthed, "Oh shit," with undisguised glee. It took Morgan about 3 minutes to notice me. I watched her eyes scan the crowd, pass over me, snap back. Her face went through a fascinating series of expressions: confusion, recognition, anger, then something that looked almost like panic. She excused herself from her group and strode toward me with Mom in tow. Her smile was rigid, her eyes furious. "Skylar," she hissed when she reached me, positioning herself to block me from the rest of the guests. "What are you doing here? I specifically told you that this event was for serious donors," I finished calmly. "I remember. You were very clear." "Then what?" Mom started. "There's been a misunderstanding," Morgan interrupted, her voice tight with forced pleasantness for anyone listening. "My sister wasn't on the guest list. I'm sure you understand we need to maintain certain standards." "Ms. Anderson?" A new voice interrupted. Patricia, the volunteer coordinator, approached with an older man in an expensive suit, Richard Chin, the foundation's director. He looked confused and concerned. "Mr. Chin needs to speak with you. Both of you." Morgan's smile turned glacial. "Patricia, this isn't the time." "It's about the venue," Richard said quietly. "There's been some confusion with the owner and we need to sort it out immediately." Perhaps we could step into one of the private rooms. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to set boundaries with toxic family, because what happened next changed everything. David had reserved the Cascade Room, one of the smaller event spaces off the main ballroom. It was beautifully appointed. Original woodwork, a smaller but equally stunning chandelier, and crucially, privacy. Richard led our group inside. Me, Morgan, Mom, Patricia, and David, who'd quietly joined us. Morgan's husband Brad had noticed the procession and followed, looking bewildered. "What is this about?" Morgan demanded once the door closed. "We're in the middle of the event." "That's precisely the issue," Richard said, his discomfort evident. "I received a call from the building's property manager about 30 minutes ago. Apparently, there's been a significant misunderstanding about tonight's event." He looked at David, who stepped forward with a professional smile and a leather portfolio I recognized. "I'm David Reeves, property manager for Schuyler Anderson Properties, LLC, he said formally. "I handle all bookings and operations for the Bellevue Ballroom and Towers." Morgan blinked. "Yes, we've been working together. Is there a problem with the space?" "Not with the space," David said carefully. "But there's been some confusion about the guest list. Specifically about one guest who was apparently told she couldn't attend." "I don't understand what that has to do with," Morgan started. David opened the portfolio and removed a document, sliding it across the small conference table toward Richard. "This is the original booking contract for tonight's event. The one signed by the foundation 3 months ago." Richard picked it up, scanning quickly. His expression shifted from confused to shocked. "This says the property owner is Schuyler Anderson," I said quietly. "That would be me." The silence that followed was exquisite. Morgan's face drained of color. Mom's mouth literally fell open. Brad looked from me to Morgan like he'd missed several crucial pieces of information. "That's not possible," Morgan said flatly. "You're a caterer's assistant. You live in a studio apartment. You can't possibly." "I'm a commercial property developer," I corrected gently. "I specialize in historic building restoration. And I actually live in a 2-bedroom condo in the Emerald Tower, but I've never bothered to correct your assumptions." David removed another document. The purchase agreement from 18 months ago. Schuyler Anderson Properties, LC, acquired the Bellevue Ballroom and Towers for $8.5 million. We've since invested $3.5 million in restoration. Current market valuation is approximately $12.2 million. He placed the document on top of the contract. Official seals, signatures, notary stamps. Everything that made denial impossible. The property includes the grand ballroom for smaller event rooms, the rooftop terrace, and 12 luxury residential units on the upper floors, I added. We also own the parking structure next door. Every car in the lot tonight is parked in a space I own. Morgan's hands were shaking. "This is ridiculous. You're lying. Where would you even get that kind of money?" "Grandma Ruth," I said simply. "She left me $200,000 specifically because she knew you'd all dismissed me. She told me to build something you couldn't take from me. So I did." Mom made a small choked sound. "Ruth left you, but she barely left anything." "She left you $20,000 each," I corrected. "She left me 10 times that, with a note explaining exactly why. I still have the note if you'd like to read it." Patricia was trying very hard not to smile. Richard looked like he was calculating rapidly, probably running through every interaction the foundation had had with the venue. "The discount," he said suddenly. "We booked this space for 40% below market rate. I thought we'd just gotten incredibly lucky with the timing." "I gave the foundation a discount," I confirmed. "Because Morgan called me so excited about her big event, and I wanted to see how she'd treat me when she thought I had no power to object." Morgan's voice came out strangled. "You were testing us? You were excluding me," I replied, my voice harder now. "From a family foundation event. Because you were embarrassed by my existence. So yes, Morgan, I wanted to see if you'd actually go through with it. If you'd really tell your sister she wasn't worthy of attending a charity gala at her own property. You should have told us." Mom exclaimed. "This whole thing you let us think." "I let you show me exactly who you are," I interrupted. "You thought I was struggling, and instead of offering help you mocked me. You used my supposed failure as a punchline at family dinners. You uninvited me from events because my poverty embarrassed you. David cleared his throat. There's more. He removed a third document, this one thicker with multiple pages. Ms. Anderson requested I conduct a review of the foundation's financial practices when the booking was made. Given that her property was being used for fundraising, she wanted to ensure everything was legitimate. Richard's face went pale. A review? What kind of? A forensic accounting review, I said clearly, with a focus on donation allocation and expense reporting. Morgan shot to her feet. You had no right. I had every right, I countered, my voice cold steel. My property, my rules. And it's a good thing I did. David flipped through the pages, his finger landing on a highlighted section. The review found several concerning patterns. Over the past 2 years, the Anderson Family Foundation reported significant administrative expenses. Approximately $180,000 in total. Foundations have expenses, Morgan said quickly, but her voice cracked. That's normal. These expenses included personal clothing purchases marked as event attire, David continued relentlessly. A $15,000 family vacation to Hawaii marked as a donor cultivation trip, despite no donors being present. Regular transfers to personal accounts marked as consulting fees, despite no consulting services being documented. Richard's hands were shaking as he read the document. Morgan, please tell me this isn't. She's lying. Morgan shouted. She's making this up because she's jealous. I have receipts, I said quietly. Credit card statements from the foundation account. Bank transfer records. Photos from your Instagram showing the Hawaii vacation with the caption "Much needed family time." Not a word about donor cultivation. Your own social media provided half the evidence. Mom had sat down heavily, her face gray. Morgan, what did you do? The total misappropriation is approximately $180,000, David concluded, which constitutes charitable fraud under Washington state law. I've already filed the preliminary report with the Attorney General's office, as required when this level of financial irregularity is discovered. The door opened suddenly. Richard had called for backup without any of us noticing. 2 people entered, one in a business suit with an Attorney General's office badge, the other in the casual blazer of a detective. Morgan Anderson, the detective said. I'm Detective Sarah Martinez. We need to ask you some questions about the foundation's finances. Brad grabbed Morgan's arm. Don't say anything. We need a lawyer. That's everyone's right, Detective Martinez agreed pleasantly. But we have documentation of systematic misappropriation of charitable funds. We can do this here quietly or at the station officially. Your choice. Morgan turned to me, her face twisting with rage and desperation. You set this up. You planned this whole thing. I gave you a discounted venue, I said calmly. You chose to commit fraud. You chose to exclude me because you thought I couldn't fight back. You made every single choice that led to this moment. The gala, Richard said weakly, looking toward the ballroom. There are 300 people out there who came to support charity, not watch you embezzle, I finished. Here's what's going to happen. Detective Martinez is going to take Morgan for questioning. Richard, you and Patricia are going to make a brief announcement that there's been a financial irregularity with the foundation's management, and that all donations tonight will be held in escrow pending a full audit. You can't, Mom started. My venue, my rules, I repeated. You can cooperate or I can have security escort all of you out and explain to those 300 donors exactly why the Anderson Family Foundation is under criminal investigation. The choice was clear. Morgan left with Detective Martinez, Brad trailing behind, already on his phone with lawyers. Mom sat frozen in her chair, unable to process what had just happened. Richard and Patricia returned to the ballroom to make the announcement, edited for maximum discretion but minimum ambiguity. I stayed in the Cascade Room, standing by the window overlooking Elliott Bay. The city lights sparkled on the dark water, beautiful and indifferent to human drama. David approached quietly. The Attorney General investigator wants to speak with you. And there are several guests asking who you are. Jennifer Kim has apparently been telling people you own the building. Give me 5 minutes, I said. Then I'll handle it. He nodded and left me alone. I pulled out my phone and looked at the last text from Grandma Ruth, sent 2 weeks before she died. I'd saved it, read it 100 times. Build something beautiful. Build something that's yours. They'll never understand you, sweetheart, but that's their loss, not yours. She'd been right. About all of it. The immediate aftermath moved quickly. Detective Martinez returned to get formal statements. Morgan was arrested 2 days later, not just for the foundation fraud, but for identity theft after the investigation revealed she'd taken out a credit card in my name 4 years ago, running up $30,000 in debt I'd never known about until the background check David's investigator had run. Mom called me 6 times that first week. I didn't answer. She finally sent a text. We need to talk about what happened. Morgan made mistakes, but she's still your sister. Family is supposed to forgive. I replied once. Family is also supposed to not commit fraud and identity theft. Family is supposed to include all their children, not just the ones that impress their friends. You taught me that blood doesn't guarantee respect. I learned the lesson. She didn't respond. But Dad did 3 weeks later with a voicemail that demanded I fix this and stop embarrassing the family. I saved it for the investigators. His words included some implied threats that interested the prosecutor. The legal consequences unfolded over months. Morgan pled guilty to charitable fraud and identity theft. She received 18 months in federal prison and was ordered to repay $210,000, the misappropriated foundation funds plus the credit card debt. Brad filed for divorce before she started her sentence. Last I heard, she was working in a grocery store after release, her social climbing dreams thoroughly crushed. Mom and Dad lost their house, not because of legal action, but because the mortgage had been underwater for years, propped up by loans from Morgan that had actually been stolen foundation money. Once that income stream ended, they couldn't keep up payments. The Anderson Family Foundation dissolved. Richard and Patricia started a new charitable organization with proper oversight and transparent accounting. I donated the first $50,000 to their genuine efforts. Patricia sent me a thank you card with a simple note. For real charity, not image management. My business expanded. The publicity from the case, handled carefully to focus on restoration and property development, not family drama, brought new opportunities. I acquired 2 more historic properties over the following year. Elena became my official business partner. We hired a team of 6, all people who appreciated architecture and understood that buildings had stories worth preserving. I changed my phone number. Blocked Mom, Dad, and Morgan on all platforms. Built boundaries with steel and reinforced them with distance. Brad reached out once, months after the divorce. Apologetic, claiming he hadn't known what Morgan was doing. I didn't believe him. He'd been at those family dinners, laughed at those jokes about my situation, but I appreciated the attempt. I told him I hoped he'd learn something from the experience. He didn't contact me again. The Bellevue Ballroom and Towers became one of Seattle's premier event venues. We hosted weddings, galas, corporate functions, all carefully vetted, all treating our staff with respect. I implemented a policy. Anyone who was rude to our employees got escorted out immediately, regardless of how much money they'd paid. My building, my rules. I framed Grandma Ruth's note and hung it in my office. Build something they can't take from you. I did. And they couldn't. If you've ever had to walk away to save yourself, tell me your story in the comments. What would you have done? Does any of this feel familiar? Sometimes the family you build is worth more than the one you were born into.